Hey, what's going on, everybody? Cody Pasby back with you for this week's edition of Mojobreak's Hobby Stars of the Week. Gonna mix things up a little bit this week. We are well into the second half of the Major League season, so we're gonna focus on some guys that maybe have fallen off your radar a little bit. Underperforming players, stars that have been injured, and some top prospects that we could be seeing in the Major Leagues very, very soon. First up, a guy that we couldn't stop talking about in 2020. That would be Chicago White Sox star center fielder Luis Robert. Yeah, remember that guy? Everybody was talking about him. Everybody wanted his cards. He was the wonderkind. He could do no wrong. The Cuban Mike Trout, they were calling him. Well, then he got hurt. But Luis Robert was performing very well up until that point. He's been out since May 2nd, but he was batting over 300 with an .822 OPS, and he was just starting to get really hot, batting .392 with a .955 OPS in the 14 games prior to his injury. Obviously, there were a lot of ups and downs with Luis Robert in the 2020 season. But it didn't take away really from his value in the hobby. I think a lot of collectors were still pretty bullish on the White Sox young superstar. And there's a lot to love. He's still young. He's a great player on a great team in a great situation. They're in first place, even without Robert and without Eloy Jimenez. There might have been a slight dip in his value just because of the injury and because other superstar players, many of them younger than Luis Robert, namely Fernando Tatis and Vladimir Guerrero Jr., have taken the spotlight away from him in his absence. Trying to invest in him now might be a little bit tougher. I think the hype is starting to grow around him again. People are starting to remember what a good player this guy is, a spectacular athlete, both defensively and when he puts it all together in the batter's box. If you're looking for Luis Robert to reach the astronomical heights of some of the guys I've already mentioned, there's just not enough time in the season. But a strong finish here for the Chicago White Sox and a big playoff push with Luis Robert at the forefront, plus Eloy Jimenez, could do wonders for his value coming into the offseason, and he's still got a long way to go. Or if you've already written this guy off and you're focusing on some other players, I think look no further than Vladimir Guerrero Jr. as a guy that you just have to be a little patient with. Such a young player, so much raw talent, and look at what he's done this year. He is having an MVP caliber season. Will Luis Robert have that sort of season in 2022? I'm not saying that, but I'm also saying that it is not even close to out of the question with the amount of talent this guy has. Next up, speaking of MVP caliber players, Cody Bellinger of the Los Angeles Dodgers. If you watched our countdown of the top 10 baseball players in the hobby before the season started, we've already started with two guys on that list. And Bellinger is the guy who has probably fallen the hardest and is now completely off the map. Granted, he has suffered multiple injuries. A hairline fracture in his left leg back in April. He missed time due to hamstring tightness in June. But since his return on June 23rd, he's batting 100 and hitting for basically no power. And as much as I want to give you some glimmer of hope that things are going to get better for him, it's really hard for me to see right now as he's currently mired in a 1-for-26 slump as of this recording. Before the season, I was really hyping Cody Bellinger as an underrated superstar in the hobby. Hard to really justify that right now with the way he's playing. The only bit of solace I could take if you've got Cody Bellinger in your personal collection is that he is simply a better player than this. We've seen it enough times in his major league career. There is enough of a body of work to show that this guy can perform at an MVP level. He's still just 26 years old. He's got a ton of potential in a great lineup. The up and down season, the constant injuries, it does a lot to you to shake your confidence, to upset your timing. I think that's what's happening here for Cody Bellinger, who is an excellent baseball player. But at the same time, I understand it if you're having your doubts right now. He's not hitting the ball very hard. He's not hitting the ball for power, and he's striking out a ton. Still, I don't think it's the worst bet in the world. In fact, I think it's a pretty good one to buy really low on Cody Bellinger right now. He still plays in LA, and when he's right, he is still one of the premier power hitters in all of baseball. But if he can't put things together soon, the Dodgers are going to have a very tough decision to make this offseason when Corey Seager goes to free agency, and the decision becomes, do you offer Cody Bellinger a big contract to extend past his arbitration years, or do you forego that and sign Corey Seager to a long-term deal? If Cody Bellinger can become the player he is capable of becoming in these last few months, that decision becomes a lot easier for the Dodgers. And if you decided to invest in him right now, you should be feeling pretty smart. Next up, another struggling youngster playing for a big market team, Yankees infielder Gleyber Torres. There's been so much talk about some of the faces of baseball over the last couple of years, some of the young stars that are going to define the game. And after the 2019 season, Gleyber Torres was right in the middle of it all. His 62 home runs from 2018 and 2019 was the same number of home runs that Joey Gallo and Jose Ramirez hit. All-star caliber players, MVP caliber players. That's where Gleyber Torres was at just the age of 22 years old. We were talking about him in the same breath as Tatis, as Acuna, as Soto, as all of these incredibly young, talented players in baseball. And then something happened. Call it the yips. Call it getting exposed. Me personally, I think it was him trying to switch positions, coming in there as a second baseman, moving over to shortstop where he really has not been a good fit, and just kind of bouncing all around the infield. And I think it has shaken his confidence a lot. As of this recording, in 497 plate appearances since the 2020 season, Torres has just 9 home runs, and his .667 OPS is the 14th lowest in the majors among qualifying players. So why should you even think about investing in this guy? Well, for one, he's 24 years old. That's just a year older than Luis Robert. It's just 2 years older than Tatis and Guerrero Jr. And two, since his OPS hit .629, he's actually done pretty well, hitting 3 home runs. It's hard to see Gleyber Torres reaching the same sort of stratosphere as some of these young stars we've mentioned so far. But we've seen him do it. 38 home runs at just 22 years old, playing in the pressure cooker known as Yankee Stadium. Of all the guys we're going to mention on this episode, Torres is probably the cheapest buy right now. And while his ceiling might not be at the same level as Luis Robert or Cody Bellinger, I think there is still a lot of room to grow if he can find his confidence, find his swing again, find a position that he's comfortable at, and become that version that we saw in 2019. All right, enough negativity. Let's get positive here for our final player that we're highlighting this week, Kansas City Royals prospect Bobby Witt Jr. What an incredible run this young man is having in the minor leagues. To go from the 2nd overall pick in 2019 to having a legitimate shot at being a call-up come September. There was some talk, especially from us in the hobby, that maybe Bobby Witt Jr. should just go straight to the majors. Who needs the minor leagues? And while he's not skipping the minor leagues entirely, he is making it look pretty damn easy. Witt skipped single A entirely after a red-hot spring training, and he's just bolting through the Royals farm system so far. In Double A, he had 16 home runs at a .939 OPS, and he just recently got called up to Triple A. And in just his 2nd game, he hit an inside-the-park home run, and he's got 5 hits in his first 11 at-bats. There may not be a better all-around prospect right now in Major League Baseball than Bobby Witt Jr. He's a consensus top 10 prospect. He could be up as soon as September. Gonna be hard to get his cards right now if you don't have them in your personal collection yet. But if you've been racking them up over the last year or so, boy, it's going to pay off a lot sooner than you might have been expecting. And with the Royals having their own injury problems at shortstop, Adalberto Mondesi has been out almost the entire year. Witt could be up sooner rather than later, and he might be sticking around for a long time, and very soon, he might be one of the most prized players for baseball collectors in the hobby. That's going to do it for this week. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to Mojobreak Media for more content. And let us know in the comments which player that's been out for a while, which guy who's been slumping, which prospect that we haven't been talking about is a guy that you are looking to collect right now. Let us know below in the comments. We'll see you guys soon for another edition of Hobby Stars of the Week.